The great debate. Which one is better? Is it the Dominator 3 or the TIV 2? Is there even a definitive answer? Well, in order to figure that out, we have to dive a little deeper. Let's take a look at the stats. At first glance, you may notice the cheaper price of the Dominator 3, which can be very enticing. But then we look down. They drive the same speed, so we can disregard that until we get to the dirt roads. The TIV 2 has a huge advantage here with the dirt speed being a whole 10 miles an hour higher. But the acceleration, the Dominator takes the cake here, and it's really not even that close. And then the fuel economy, where the Dominator is twice as efficient as the TIV. And then you turn to the fuel tank size, where the TIV's is almost triple the size, which I'd say makes up for the lesser fuel economy. And yet another great thing about the TIV, its wind resistance. Surviving up to 235 mile an hour sustained wind speeds inside of a tornado is not something any other vehicle can offer. And yes, while the Dominator still can survive a tornado with EF5 strength winds, it's not as high, making it go airborne just 25 mile an hour less than a scenario where the same would happen to the TIV. But here's the big talking point for most people: deployment speed. The Dominator is in perfect condition to survive some of the strongest winds imaginable in under 10 seconds. Meanwhile, for the TIV, it takes almost 30. That means the decision here is up to your ability and playstyle. Think to yourself, what do you tend to do? Do you drive up right next to tornadoes and place all your probes as quickly as possible? Then maybe you're a Dominator 3 player. But what if you take a more organized and planned out path to every tornado, making sure every intercept is perfect? Well, then you're probably a TIV 2 player. But what about the upgradability? The Dominator 3 is the best it can be while stock, but the TIV 2 has a large array of upgraded variants you can add onto it. Let's take the 2009 TIV 2 as an example, where the stats are all the exact same besides its deployment speed, which is an additional 5 seconds quicker and obviously more expensive. What about the 2024 TIV 2? Well, it's once again much more expensive and may have a 15 mile an hour lighter threshold for getting picked up by tornadoes. It deploys 7 whole seconds faster, which can be a lifesaver. And what about the things that the stats don't tell you? Well, there's only 2 things that really apply here, and one of them is the Dominator 3 and its rocket probes. Having the ability to record data with extreme precision from long distances is not something that is offered by any other vehicle in the game. But if we look at it from an economic standpoint, then yeah, these suck. 9 times out of 10, you make less money off of a rocket probe than what you would have paid for it. So if I were you, unless you desperately need to measure data from far away, I would steer away from using these. However, on the TIV 2's end, it seems like everyone tends to forget one of the most important parts of the vehicle. As the TIV 2 is deploying, with each step of the deployment process completed, the deployment threshold gradually gets closer to the maximum, which makes you able to deploy much closer to tornadoes, as your threshold should go up slowly with the winds of the tornado, instead of what otherwise would be essentially a wait time while the animation plays. Because of this, I think it's safe to say that the TIV 2 is objectively the better vehicle. But is there an objective answer for every argument here? Well, let's find out.
Dominator 1 versus the Tornado Wrangler. Now, let me preface this one by saying I am struggling to understand exactly how this became an argument. Before even diving too far into this, I think there's a pretty obvious answer. But despite what I think, this is not a matter of opinion. At the first glance of the stats of each of the 2 vehicles, you've probably confused why they're even being compared. In case you didn't already know, the Tornado Wrangler can actually deploy, it just doesn't mention the threshold or deploy time in the stats. Let's start with those first. The Tornado Wrangler, when undeployed, has the same threshold as any regular vehicle. However, when it deploys, it has a threshold of about 155 mile an hour, although since it isn't mentioned, it's difficult to find the exact number. The Dominator 1, on the other hand, has an undeployed threshold of 140 mile an hour and a deployed threshold of 170 mile an hour. Based on this statistic alone, then technically that would make the Dominator the better vehicle. But this becomes false basically immediately whenever you bring in any other statistic. Take a look at the road speed, where the Dominator travels at 105 mile an hour and the Tornado Wrangler travels at 110 mile an hour. While this difference is very minor, it still has an advantage. Here's another big one: probe capacity. The Tornado Wrangler carries an extra probe in comparison, which is a huge advantage, especially early game. The fuel capacity and fuel economy are both better in the Tornado Wrangler as well, by a long shot too. Don't forget to look at the acceleration either, because the Tornado Wrangler speeds up about twice as fast as the Dominator 1. Now let's take a look at the most important stat here, that for whatever reason, some people tend to just gloss over completely. The dirt speed of the Tornado Wrangler is 85 miles per hour, which is the fastest dirt speed of any vehicle in the game, while the Dominator 1 has an off-road speed of 65 miles an hour, which is just average, if anything. And another big one, the grass speed. The Dominator 1's grass speed is too low to even consider driving on grass to be an option, where the Tornado Wrangler has a grass speed of 60 miles per hour, which is faster than some vehicles' dirt speeds. The Tornado Wrangler is the only vehicle in the entire game where driving on grass is actually a viable option, and even if the other great things about the Tornado Wrangler weren't in question, that fact alone is almost enough to make the Tornado Wrangler a better vehicle. But since those other great things about the Tornado Wrangler are there, it is no question, objectively, the better vehicle. The Scout versus the Vortex 2 probe truck. In the past, I've switched sides on which vehicle I thought was better numerous times. This is, in fact, a really close argument, but after multiple hours of playtime in both vehicles now, there definitely is a correct answer. Now it's time to compare the stats. Fuel economy and fuel capacity. The Vortex 2 probe truck is definitely better. Acceleration. Again, the Vortex 2 probe truck is better. They're equal in off-road speed at 65 miles an hour, so we can disregard that. And in speed, the Scout takes the cake, but not by much. Now, based off of those stats, you're probably thinking, oh, well, it has to be the Vortex 2 probe truck then, right? Well, here's what the stats don't tell you. The Vortex 2 probe truck is a larger and harder to move vehicle, while the Scout is one of the smallest, most nimble vehicles in the entire game, while still being able to hold 4 probes. Now at this point in the argument, it's extremely close until you factor in the price. For these vehicles being as close as a competition they are, there is absolutely no reason for the Vortex 2 probe truck to be 7 times more expensive. Because of this, the Scout is definitely the better vehicle. RaXPol versus Dow 6 versus Dow 3. Well, some things are pretty obvious here. It doesn't take a genius to see that based on appearance, the RaXPol is 100% the most nimble, fastest, and best handling vehicle here, as well as having the ability to survive the strongest winds out of the group. Now, the deployment speeds may seem really bad, with RaXPol taking 38 seconds, Dow 3 taking 1 minute and 52 seconds, and then Dow 6 taking a whopping 2.5 minutes to deploy, which is definitely rough. That doesn't really matter anyway, because the moment you click deploy, everything works automatically, and you don't have to wait for the animations to play. Oh, and also, for whatever reason, the Dow 6 can carry probes, unlike the other two. And let's not forget the price of the vehicles either. The RaXPol and Dow 3 are very close in price, only $50,000 apart, while the Dow 6 is much more expensive by $200,000. Now, it's important to mention that the stats state that the Dow 6 has an acceleration speed of 700, which is much faster than most vehicles in the game. However, that is not supposed to be like that. But who cares about movement stats anyway? I know very well that most of you probably don't even drive your scanning vehicles, and rather drive your main probing vehicle, switch to the Doppler, and switch immediately back after scanning. So scanning is definitely the most important factor here. So let's take a look at some scanning stats. So in order to collect these scanning stats, I conducted an experiment where the RaXPol, Dow 3, and Dow 6 were all in one spot, all scanning the Tornado at the same time. The Tornado remained roughly a quarter mile to 3/4 miles away the whole time, and the vehicles all started and finished scanning at the exact same time. During this time scanning, the accuracy remained consistent between the 3 vehicles, with the largest gap in measured wind speeds the whole time being only a minor 3 miles per hour. Now let's look at the income, which is definitely the most important part here. After assessing all the data, we have a definitive ranking for which scanning vehicle was bringing in the most money from this specific Tornado. And the ranking will more than likely stay the same in any situation, which I have tested in the past. In third place, we have the Dow 3, bringing in an average of $840 a minute. In second place, we have the Dow 6, bringing in an average of $922.50 per minute, which means first place is held by RaXPol, which brings in $1,080 per minute. Dominator 1 versus Tiv 1. This is yet another age-old debate. For over 3 years now, people have been arguing over which vehicle is the best first interceptor they can get. Now, since I already covered the Dominator 1 once already, I'm not going to go too in depth with that, so let's take a look at the Tiv 1. To start, you may notice that the deployment threshold being better than the Dominator 1's, even if it is only by 5 miles an hour. And the Tiv 1 is definitely more fuel efficient, but it takes diesel, so it's difficult to compare there. Now let's take a look at the maneuverability of the Tiv. First off, you'll notice the 50 mile an hour off-road speed and the 95 mile an hour road speed, which is not great. In fact, this is the slowest vehicle in the entire game in both categories, tied with the Dow 3. The Tiv 1 is also one of the slowest accelerating vehicles in the entire game. And outside of this, it has terrible handling. It turns like an actual boat and is so low to the ground that it gets stuck on every little curb or piece of debris in the road. I think the answer is pretty clear here. The Dominator 1 is definitely the better vehicle. F-150, Tundra, or Silverado. Once again, this is another debate that has been present since the very beginning of Twisted. At first glance, we notice that these vehicles are very similar in a lot of values. For example, they are all around the same price, have similar fuel capacities and off-road speed. Speaking of the off-road speed, they come stock with an off-road speed of 65 miles an hour, which can be upgraded to 75 miles an hour. They all have similar acceleration and all have a capacity of 3 probes as well. So, what's different? Well, the fuel economy is a big one here for sure, as well as the top speed of the vehicles. When we consider these statistics, the Tundra is the worst in both categories, so we can disqualify that one. Now we are down to the F-150 and the Silverado. Now the F-150 is one of the better handling vehicles in the game, unlike the Silverado. The Silverado has a rather large mesonet for whatever reason, which can make it difficult to pass through in some areas, especially after a tornado hits. But is this enough to drown out the extra 10 mile an hour top speed? In most situations, probably not, making the Silverado the winner of this debate. Tornado Wrangler versus the Scout. This debate is mostly centered around one main thing: which vehicle makes money faster? These are both contenders for what the most profitable vehicle in Twisted might be. On one hand, we have the Scout. Quick, nimble, great for getting in and out of places in a hurry, while fitting 4 probes. And on the other hand, we have the Tornado Wrangler. Quick, can go basically anywhere, holds 3 probes, and can deploy if you get into a sticky situation. To be honest, there isn't a clear answer here. This one is actually up to you and your chasing style. If you chase more formally, you're probably a Scout player. If you're like me and just get as close to the Tornado as you can and drop probes, then you're definitely a Tornado Wrangler player. Is the Dominator 2 overlooked? The Dominator 2 is one of the least commonly used chasing vehicles. The reason for this is usually one of 2 things. Either people are impatient and want to get an interceptor as soon as possible and settle for the Dominator 1, or have the mindset of, I already made it this far, why buy this and reset my progress when I could just grind to the Tiv 2? To be fair, while both of these are valid reasons to gloss over it, I still think it's overlooked. The Dominator 2 is a huge jump up for only being $50,000 more expensive than the Dominator 1. It drives faster, is more fuel efficient, and can survive significantly higher wind speeds. It's just in that awkward spot where there's a cheaper beginner vehicle and a better in-game vehicle. So even if the Dominator 2 is overlooked, the reasons why this is the case are pretty valid. Well, with that settled, that brings this video to an end. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe if you're new. And remember, next time you don't know what vehicle to buy, refer back to this, as long as there hasn't been any major updates since this video was made. With that being said, I'll see you guys later. Peace.